You are listening to the Living Room Confessional Podcast. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Living Room Confessional Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney. In today's episode, which I've titled A Loving No from God, I want to talk about when God says no and a better way to respond. And I'm going to give some examples of different ways that I've responded just so that you guys have some reference. I think this is going to be a really good episode. And if you are in a transitional season or you're in a season where God has removed his hand from something because he wants you to do something different, I think this episode will really help you. A loving no from God is better than 1,000 yeses from the world. God withholds no good thing from his children, yet we continue to get angry and frustrated with God. Psalms 84 says, "For the Lord God is the sun and shield. The Lord grants favor and honor, and he does not withhold good from those who love with integrity." Think about it this way. The one time God says no, the one no that you don't want from God, could literally be God protecting you from quickening your demise, ending your marriage, marrying the wrong person, getting fired from your job, losing a friendship, going somewhere you shouldn't be, and ending up in a really bad situation. You never know what that no is protecting you from. God's no's are filled with just as much love and promise as his yeses, because they're both saturated with his love for you. I go before the Lord and I hope and have anticipation and I have expectation of his goodness and his works in my life, but I don't get to choose how and when it's done. This season of my life has been filled with frustration and questions. I've had to go to God many times and tell him there is fear in my heart. It's not fear of your will, but I don't have a full grasp on what's happening, but I know I can't stop trusting in you. Even when I'm doing what God has told me to do, there's fear because now I'm breaking old patterns and nothing is the same. And God said in Isaiah 43:19, "I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it?" I perceive it, but every time I make a misstep and God says no, I stumble. And I have to go back to what he last told me. And sometimes it's scary when that happens. It's a profound feeling to walk in yeses and have God's grace just flowing all over you all the time, like just honey dripping on honeycomb. It's amazing. But then you realize last week when God said yes, that was yes to that specific thing last week. And this week it's a no. Have you ever felt like the atmosphere changed in the middle of a breakthrough? For years, God has had his hand on my life, and I knew his hand was on my life. I promise you, I cannot sell a camel water in the desert. Like, I'm not a salesperson at all. That is not my forte, nor do I ever really want it to be. But I know that it's an important thing. So in my job, which happened to be in sales, don't ask me how that happened. Actually, you could ask me how it happened, and I'd tell you God did it. But stepping into that role, I had no idea how much of a sales background I would need to sustain myself in that season. And so I started doing something because I had a quota that I had to make every single quarter. And for years, I started doing this. Before a quarter ended and the next quarter began, I would thank God for what he already had been doing. I thank God for what he was planning to do next. And I would fully surrender my quarter to God before it started, with the expectation that his will was going to be done regardless of what other people said, what the quota was, if it changed, if it didn't change, his will was going to be done. So I would just surrender that quota to him and just give him the quarter. And when I tell you, for years, I blew my quota out of the water. I either hit it or I exceeded it. But there was only one quarter where I missed it, and that was the quarter when I first started, and I had not yet started doing that. And so that became kind of a ritual. Every time a quarter was ending, I was already praying for the next quarter before it began, because I knew that God would exceed my expectations if it was his will for me to hit my quota or surpass it, whatever it was. his will was going to be done. And I think something that was very important in how I postured myself during this time was I took no credit. People would be like, you hit your quota again. And I'd be like, yeah, God did it. I didn't do that. I have no idea how this happened. I'm not a salesperson. I will tell you straight up, sales is not my forte. I love processes. I'm a very process-oriented person. But if you put me in a room full of salespeople, they're probably going to see right through me. So whenever I tell people, like, or they see my quota or they see what God is doing, I'm like, he did it. I cannot take credit for this. I just came to work and I did what I was supposed to do, and he took care of the rest. There was a point, even after God told me to leave the company, and I had said yes, that my quota was still coming through strong. Like, I still hit my quota. Even though that was like a difficult quarter for me, I still hit my quota strong. And there was one more quarter before my last day. And so I asked God, because I was kind of going through it at that time, and I was like, hey, can I stay a little bit longer? And he, clear as day, said no. It did not take long for me to realize that he had taken his hand off the work. I was doing, like, everything became frustrated. It was harder. I knew he was still on my side because throughout it all, even though people were giving me grief and I was kind of just going through a bit of a rough patch, I still had peace, and I knew his hand was still on my life and he was still with me. But as far as the work goes, like, it was a no. And so, like I said, it became very frustrating. And so I started praying for strength, and God actually gave me peace. And that turned into my strength. And while everything was kind of like buzzing around me, the world was just buzzing around me, I was like it was like I was in a bubble. I was just at peace. I realized that God protects us in so many different ways. And to understand those ways, you have to get to know God. In the story of Joseph, God protected him and he was elevated. Every time you thought that Joseph, like, it could not get worse for this man, God showed up and showed him favor, and people always notice. And then you think about Elijah, who ran from the king, and God still came to him and comforted him and gave him rest and food and everything that he needed. When I think about the story of Peter praying on the roof, and God showed him the sheet that came down in the vision with all the animals on it, and Peter is like, Lord, I am not eating those animals. Like, I'm a good Jew. Like, I'm not eating those animals. And God was like, nothing I made is unclean. Peter was sitting there like, these are unclean things. I would never eat this. And God is like, nothing I've made is unclean. God will vindicate you. Even when the world tells you that you're wrong, if it's God's will, then it's the right thing to do. When you are doing his will, there's no such thing as I can't. When God says something is good, it's good. And when God says go, go. When God says no, it's no. But also remember, everything he says is for your good. There's another verse I wanted to tie to this, and it's Romans 8:32. He did not even spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also with him grant us everything? God wants to bless us with the things that we need, with the things that we desire, but he's our Father first. As a loving father, he knows when to say no and when to say yes. It's for our benefit and protection because we are his children. And so I just want to implore you guys, trust in God. I don't know what season you're in. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what God's plans are for your life. But if he says no, stand firm in your faith and knowing that if God says no, then understand that it is probably for your protection and he is blocking you from something. And if you go outside of his will, that's usually when we start having issues and strongholds and turmoil and all these things in spiritual warfare, because we've stepped outside of his protection. If God is saying no, trust it. The world will always say yes to everything you want. Be who you want to be. Validate yourself. Do all these things. But the world is not going to come to your aid when things start to go wrong. God will come to your aid and he will renew you. And if you just trust in him, lean not on your own understanding. His no's are not always meant for you to understand in that moment. Sometimes, for me, a lot of times it's hindsight. When I look back and I think, God, you really blocked me from that. I'll hear a story years later and it's like, that place you wanted to go, that thing you wanted to do, those people that you were trying to hang out with, they're in jail. They did this. They hurt this person. This person became this. God is blocking you from something. I have to constantly remind myself that when God says no, limit your frustration and lean not on your own understanding. I always go to God, and we're kids. In God's eyes, we are his children. I will ask, did I do something wrong? Am I just not ready? I'll actually ask God, okay, I understand that you said no, but is there something that I should be doing because you said no? Am I just not ready? Is it not the season? God will answer. And sometimes he doesn't, but a lot of times he does, especially concerning me. I ask God questions all the time. You have to be open to accepting what he says, even if you don't like it. But sometimes I think as his children, he understands that even though the no is sufficient and it speaks volumes and it says a lot, that sometimes we do need a little bit more to help us on and help us through. And sometimes when you see something or somebody tells you something, oh, this person actually hurt this person, then you get that understanding. Sometimes it's not an audible answer from God. It'll be somebody coming around the way in about a week or so, and they'll tell you, oh, that guy that you liked, he hits that girl. That girl that you like, she took all his money. She used him. You have no idea what other people are going through or what he's blocking you from, so trust him. And honestly, if you decide to ask him the question, be ready for his answer. But understand that God's no is saturated in love. And it's just as good as the yes. You just have to lay down your expectations of what you think he should be doing in this season of your life and wait and see what he does when he says that you are ready. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I will talk to you in the next one. Have a good day. Bye. Thanks again for tuning in. Bye.